Welcome to the Insight class today. We're talking about calculations within Stratum. That's our topic for today. Calculations. How do we do them? We're going to go through a review of what calcs are, go through some common business calculations, variances, variance percents. How do we use attributes in calculations? So you might have some numbers there that you might want to take advantage of. You've also got some time dimensions. If you use views that have time dimensions in them, you can calculate, those as well. So we'll talk about that. Runaway views, you do for administrators, there's actually an option for monitoring views. And then we'll go into a demo and take any questions that you might have. Here's an example of what the menu looks like when you go into a calculation. So when you define a calculation, you have a menu that basically you go into and helps you set up some things within the calculation. The calculation itself is actually written here within this area here, and then on the left side are different folders that represent objects within the view. As you can see, you can get access to the different things within your view, the hierarchies, the measures. There's some functions that you can take advantage of. So we'll explore that a little bit today and take advantage of some of that. Here in the upper right hand corner is the formatting of the actual data once you get done with the calculation. And up here in the middle area on the left is the actual caption expression. So that's the name of the calculation column. And that's free form text. There is some other areas that you can go into there that you can use, like time ranges and whatnot, that you can make your header a little bit more self-explanatory if you wanted to. And we'll play around with that a little bit. When you define the calculation, as you can see, the calculation area here, this is where your math gets performed. So I'm just doing a straight variance there, just taking one measure minus the other measure. And yeah, it's just the difference between those two measures. Pretty simple. We'll go through some of this today. Very simple to set some of that up. Some of the functions that here is an example of dipping into the function folder and performing a percent of change calculation. So that's something that, once you supply the formula, it basically just needs a couple of measures to perform that percent of change calculation. So you essentially just select the measures that you want to include into the calculation. Again, we'll go through that in a demo. Attributes. So here is an example going into a hierarchy. You might have product in your view where you can dip into that and gain access to the attribute that you might have available there. In this example, we've got current list price as an attribute within my view here. So I'm able to access that. And as you can see, I can display it. So here I'm just using the val function to display it as a number or a numeric function. And so in our latest version, you won't have to do that. So that's something that is handled through a menu option. So that's something I look forward to. But that's just turning it into a number so you can displays, and I can add a display text to it. And I can calculate against it as well. So if I wanted to calculate it, I could do some math against that particular attribute, such as extending that out with my sales units. That would give me extended list price. Again, we'll take a look at some of that. I've got some views set up for that. When I do the calculation on the attribute, as you can see, it returns some rows here. If we don't clean some of that up, again, some of this is getting taken care of with the latest version. But here we can see that, I have to clean some of this up so that it doesn't return some of these empty rows. So how would I do that? Well, if I add in another if statement there, I can say, well, if my number is, if I don't have any data essentially for that column, then don't display the value. And that'll clean up, basically using that if statement there is a way to clean up some of those empty columns. So, and down here is the syntax of the if statement. There's the if statement within the numeric functions. So you can click on that and it will actually give you the syntax to it. If measure equals 0, comma, null, so just basically make that row a null, else show the list price. So if we look at the same view, it's much cleaner. Whereas before we had 165 rows returned, many of them empty. And if we add in that little if statement, it gets rid of all the empty cells and just shows me the numbers that I have data for. Now I can expand upon that. I could do if that column and the other column are equal to 0. So don't think that you can't do multiple conditions there. You can embed multiple values so that you can introduce and or statements as well. So it gets, you can get a little more sophisticated with this and weed out some of the unwanted columns that might get returned if you just show do math against the attribute without the if statement there. And again, there's my list price value there. So it's not extended per se. I wouldn't call that an extended list price. If you have time in the view, you can also use that in a calculation here. I'm actually using my current year based time value to set up a year-to-date sales measure. And then also introducing some conditional formats, we can, once we define the calculation, we can make them pop a little bit more by using some conditional formats to highlight thresholds that might be unacceptable. Any negative values we can highlight using the red conditional format, the red arrow down. Those would help the analysts identify anomalies a little easier, make it a little easier on the eyes. There's the actual conditional format menu showing how you would set that up. Anything greater than 20% would be green. Anything between 0 and 20% would be yellow. Obviously, anything negative there would be red. Pretty simple. And then the runaway views, this was introduced in version 7.1, where you can actually monitor any views that might be running for minutes, hopefully not hours. But you can go in here and you can cancel out some of the views that are running extremely long. So that's available too. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but this is what the actual menu looks like. So I can see that some of the views here are running, where I can then highlight them and click on the X to basically, bend the run job, essentially, to quit the job and stop the runaway view. So that's, again, something that's available in version 7.1 and greater. Well, there's my email address, and you can contact me at any given time to ask me any questions about Stratum. Don't hesitate. Also below is our website, customernet.sylvan.com, is built specifically for you. So that's a customer extranet site that we provide product information, what's new documents. We have a full-fledged knowledge base that's been revamped. So make sure you check out customernet.sylvan.com. That's probably the most important URL there. The forum, the forum is part of you can gain access to the forum under CustomerNet. And then there's our YouTube channel. So check us out on YouTube and subscribe to us. All right, let's go into some of the examples here. So basically, calculations. So going into some of this, we'll take a look at how we built, some of these calculations. Here we have a view here that's basically pretty simple. I've got a view that's showing me year-to-date sales this year and last. So I've got two measures essentially for different years. And so I'd want to build a variance column here in which I've already got one built. So if I double click on that, it takes me right into that menu that we just reviewed within the presentation. So here's my calculation. If I were to get rid of that and back that out, obviously I can do that. If I highlight and expand my measure items, then I can rebuild that calculation as needed. If it's just a straight, I'll just click on the measure to have it populate over here. If I put a dash in there or a minus sign, and then I put in the last year's sales amount. There, I did it. It's pretty simple. So that's this year's sales minus last year. Up here, we just put in VAR, abbreviation for the word variance, and our format here is a dollar. So obviously, that's something that we would display as dollars. If I click on validate, we can see that the expression is good. Otherwise, I'd get an error message and it would tell me that it's not working. So I click OK, and it recalculates the view or the calculation in my view. And we can see down at the bottom, roughly there's 45 million between this year and last year's sales. Pretty good growth. What's my percent of change there? Or what's my variance percent? So let's add in, so any column you can right click and add in a calculated measure item. And then that brings up, again, that same menu, right? Nothing different. Here we've got the variance column, so I could use that in my calculation, right? So I can do something like this, variance / over last year's sales. Now, the only problem with this is that if that last year, I might drill down to some detail and last year's sales might be 0. So I might get some divide by 0 errors, but this is certainly something that you could do. If I put in this would be a percent. So I would definitely want to show that as a percent. And then we can name this a variance percent or just var percent for short. I like to keep the column headers somewhat short. Let's try this out. We're going to validate it first. Seems like it likes it, so that's good. Now we're going to go ahead and click OK. All right, so there we have it. We've got our variance percent column defined. And down here on the bottom, we can see roughly that we've got 24% growth. Now, if I right click that and go into properties, I get the property menu of the actual calculated column here on the right hand side. So here I can add in that conditional format. So for instance, if I want anything that's between 0 and 20% as a yellow, I should be able to see something there that would flash yellow, and then everything else would be green, I would think. So let's try it. We're going to go ahead and say yes to conditional format, and then I'm going to select. You might have some of these already built for you. You may not. This may come up empty. If it does, you can go down here and click on custom, and you can build one from scratch. So here would be my variance percent traffic light, if you will. You can name it whatever you want, essentially, and describe it however you want. And we want to do something like we saw in the presentation, where anything greater than 20% or 0.2, you have to, display it like that. We'll then say, that's going to be the background color. I will make green. We'll go ahead and choose the ugly green. And that's what it's going to look like. Now I could do other things like the font and style, but I like to keep things fairly simple and clean. I can add an icon as well. So if I want to put in something directional, then I can do something like that as well. So it'll look like that. And then I need to do my in between. So I'll do anything greater than or equal to 0. So now I've got a middle color, a warning color, if you will, that's between the 0 and the 20%, 0 and 0.2. Then I'll go into my format there. I'll deselect the default and I'll say, well, we're going to make that yellow. And it's going to look like that. And then I'll go into my icon, and then my directional icon will be neutral, and it'll look like that. Now I can go ahead and say, well, for any other values, well, any other values would be negative because these are greater than, and this is greater than. So this accommodates for anything greater than or equal to 0. So anything else left over wouldn't be negative, which means I could just simply define what that's going to look like. Kind of fun, actually. I could do something like that. Now here, we might want to change the font color because I can't really see that too well. So we'll make it white. That looks a lot better. Okay, I think we're ready to go. I don't think we'll see any negatives, but if we do, they'll look like this. And that'll be a downward. So there, I just defined a custom traffic light. And anything greater than 20% is going to be green. Anything between that, 0 and 20% will be yellow. And then anything negative is going to be red appropriately. Now I could save this as well. So if I want to do a save as, I might want to use it again. That way I don't have to define it again. So there's a save as button to save it. So don't forget to maybe do that. And there you have it. So as anticipated, we see a warning area there. Okay. And if we drill to more detail, we can see, obviously there's only one product line in the mix. If we go to sold to, we can see that here, let's go into sugar drop and then on to sold to there. And we can see a plethora of different, and we even got some reds. So we can see that some accounts are not growing. They're actually declining, right? See how that really pops nicely, when you use these conditional formats. Of course, I can sort this column if I right-click the column header. If I put that in ascending mode, I can see some of the problematic sold tos here bubble up to the top there. So for sugar drop in the product line fresh fruit, we can see some negative growth here for some of the accounts. And of course, I can add in their attributes. Maybe I want to see who the sales rep is for these guys. So I can bring in the primary salesperson as an attribute. And there they are. So now I know who manages these accounts. So with the additional attributes, you can pop in at any given moment for any one of your dimensions, right? So, that worked out pretty good. Now I can contact Michelle and Mary, kind of see what's going on with these accounts and what's going on with the negative growth. They've got some splaining to do. Sorry, that's gotta have some fun, right? Oh, okay. So speaking of attributes, let's go in and do some math against some of those attributes. Let's see. I know I've got something here for that. We'll do the discount analysis. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And we can see a couple things in the mix here. First of all, the view runs at a product level. And so we're looking at all of our products, and we can see that the product descriptions, we've also got the product current list price available to us. And, I'm going to hide this. It's kind of stealing my thunder a little bit here. And then we've got this year and last year's sales with the variance column. Actually, we don't have this year and last year's. We've got sales dollars, sales units, and a variance between the list price. So we'll hide that too, right? So we'll pretend those aren't there. And then the current list price, again, that came from adding in an attribute, right? So that's just another attribute that's been added in. So this is the actual list price of the products that I've got listed here. So how do we calculate against these? Well, we would add in a calculation, and I've actually got one already built here for list price. So let's go ahead and show that. I'm going to right click that guy and do a show on it and bring it in. And there's my calculation. So I'm going to double click that column header and it's going to show my calculation. Now there's a couple things going on here. So I've got my list price here times my actual calculation, my units. So it's actually taking the list price and calculating that against my units. Now I don't have to use the if statement here because I'm on the latest release. So this is something that has been taken care of for me already. So get on, a moral of the story is get on the latest release and you won't have to write so much syntax. Nevertheless, this is the calculation. I'm just taking that list price. I'm bumping that up against my units sold year to date. And that gives me this number here. So obviously I can see that there's some discounting going on. And so if I bring in that variance column, I can then see the discount difference, which is $10,000 discount right there for the pair item, and so on and so forth. I can do a discount percent as well. So if I want to take that and add in another calculated measure, then I can take that var and then I can divide it by the sales or the units. Really, it doesn't. That would be a list price. So I would actually want to use the sales would probably be the best thing to use there for sure. And this would be a percent. This will be discount percent. So there's an 8% discount there. It looks about right. Yeah, we know 10,000 is 10% of 100,000. So that looks like it's spot on. So who's discounting the most? Let's sort this in descending fashion. Here's how some of our heftier discounting that's going on. Wow, it's a big discount right there. Who's getting it? You know, now I can drill to who's getting the discount. So if I drill to who's getting that discount, then I could see that it's all these guys here are getting that discount, and that's combining into all the different discounts that they're getting. See how that works? Boy, that worked out nicely. Okay, so you can use these numbers as attributes and you can actually, you know, calculate against those as well. And then here we've got, let's see, time calculation. So that's something we wanted to talk about. Here we can see that I've already got a calculation built, and I've built this calculation using time as a dimension. So this is something that you can do as using your time-based time dimensions as well. And you can create these year-to-date calculations using time as a dimension. So that's something you might want to do, you know, just to incorporate, just to learn how to incorporate time as a, you know, if I were to show time here, you know, it would look like that. Now, the reason why this year's sales is showing up is obviously that's showing up for every year because this is hard coded. It's always going to show you this year's sales. So if I were to hide that and just show the regular measure, and then, you know, then it would show me all the sales numbers for the prior years. So we can see that 17, 16, 15, and 14, you know, they all did sales there for those different years. So, but you can build a calculation if I wanted to, for instance, incorporate time into a calculation, you can actually do that and build time-based calculations. Here, I'm just using current year and my actual sales amount measure to build a year-to-date sales calculation. What that allows me to do is then just show that as just this year's sales, and then I can hide time. I can hide my time dimensions. So now I've got this year's sales. This is all year. This is all year sales because that's my regular measure. And this is the regular measure sliced with current year. So this is year-to-date sales. So if I sort this, that becomes year-to-date in descending fashion. If I sort this is lifetime sales, or whatever I have within the queue.